I was lying in bed last night just trying to sleep, and I made the mistake of looking up at the dark ceiling and just thinking about empty space.
That is always a dangerous rabbit hole to go down at night.
Oh, completely. But we have this default setting in our brains, right? Probably from high school physics, where we assume the space between things,
Mm.
like between stars or even between the atoms in your coffee cup, is just nothing.
Just a vacuum
Yeah, a blank stage where the real action happens.
is the intuitive view.
Yeah,
We think of space as a container.
yeah.
It is passive. You put furniture in a room, and you know the room doesn't do anything to the furniture.
Right, exactly. But then I opened up this massive stack of research you sent over on infinite fractal descent, or
Yeah.
IFD, and my entire concept of nothing just dissolved.
It really pulls the rug out from under you.
It does, because if these sources are right, the void isn't empty at all. It is a machine, this incredibly complex, twisting geometric machine, and it is doing a lot more than just holding stars.
It is a massive shift in perspective. We are moving from the idea of space as a stage to space as a strictly defined textured medium. And honestly, calling IFD a theory feels like an understatement at this point.
Yeah, the sources don't treat it like just another hypothesis.
Not at all. The source material describes as a paradigm shift. It is a move away from fragmented models of individual forces toward a unified scale-invariant geometric logic.
Scale invariant geometric logic, that is a mouthful.
It is a very academic way of saying the rules are the same no matter how big or small you go.
Right. And here is why I got so hooked on this for our deep dive today. That texture apparently dictates everything. It is why we have gravity, it is why our DNA spirals to the right, and it is how we might eventually build ships that can actually traverse the stars without taking 10,000 years.
And that is the exact mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking a framework that connects the physics of the incredibly huge, like universal gravity, with the biology of the incredibly small.
And then we're going to look at how engineers are actually using this logic of the void to build materials that heal themselves.
It is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Let's start right at the foundation. The source material leads with a pretty heavy critique of general relativity.
Now, Einstein is usually the gold standard. I mean, he is the guy on the poster in every science classroom. Why are these researchers picking a fight with Einstein?
Well, they aren't necessarily saying Einstein is completely wrong,
Yeah.
but that his model is too smooth.
Too smooth.
Right. General relativity treats gravity like a bowling ball on a trampoline. It curves the fabric, but that fabric is continuous. It is sleek. The researchers here argue that a perfectly smooth universe is actually inherently unstable. It misses crucial torsional components.
Unstable how, though? Like the universe would just fall apart.
Essentially, yes. The paper introduces a concept called a periodic gauge fixity.
Another terrifying term.
I know, but think of it simply. Think of it like tiling a bathroom floor. If you use square tiles, you create a regular grid. A grid has periodicity. It repeats. Left, right, up, down, it is the exact same pattern.
Okay, sure.
In physics, repeating patterns can create resonance, and resonance in a vacuum structure is very bad news. It leads to what they call Gribov ambiguities.
Gribov ambiguities. That honestly sounds like a Robert Ludlum spy novel. But practically speaking, this means mathematical collapse.
Exactly. Think about soldiers marching across a bridge. If they march in a perfect repeating rhythm, left, right, the mechanical resonance builds up and can actually shatter the bridge.
Oh, I have heard of that. They have to break step when they cross.
Right. So to prevent the universe from vibrating itself to death, the vacuum structure cannot be a regular grid. It has to be a periodic. It needs a pattern that perfectly fills the space, but never ever repeats.
And this is where that weird shape comes in, the Einstein monotile, or as the internet lovingly calls it, the hat.
The hat,
Yeah.
yes. It is a 13-sided polygon.
I actually looked up a picture of this thing before we started. It literally looks like a fedora. You are telling me the fundamental architecture of the cosmos is paved with microscopic fedoras.
It sounds totally absurd, but mathematically it is brilliant. The hat is the first known shape that can tile an infinite plane without ever creating a repeating pattern.
So no matter how far you go, the pattern never syncs up with itself.
Never. It locks the vacuum into a rigid gauge. Because it never repeats it, it kills that dangerous resonance we just talked about. It stabilizes the vacuum.
So the universe is stable specifically because it is messy, or I guess organized chaos.
Organized complexity is a better way to put it. It absorbs these arithmetic angle deficits. It locks the vacuum down so it doesn't shake itself apart.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting for us as actual physical beings.
Right, because this complexity, this texture of non-repeating tiles, that is what gives us mass.
Yes.
This was the part of the sources that made me put my coffee down. Mass isn't just stuff. I mean, you and I always thought mass was just how much matter is packed into an object.
Not in this model.
Mm.
The paper defines inertial mass as geometric friction.
Geometric friction.
Imagine that hat tiling again. The vacuum isn't a smooth sheet of ice. It is jagged. It is highly textured. When you try to push a particle, which the model describes as just a cluster of energy or a vertex cluster, when you push that across the texture, you encounter resistance.
So it is like dragging a heavy wooden box across a completely smooth floor versus dragging it across, say, a cobblestone street.
Or a thick shag carpet.
Yeah.
Exactly. That rattle you feel, that topological tension and resistance you get when pushing against the cobblestones, that is mass.
That completely flips the script on reality. You aren't heavy because you contain heavy stuff. You are heavy because you are literally grinding against the geometric texture of space-time. Mass is just the effort of moving through the background. It is the work required to shift boundaries.
Precisely. It is derived from the interaction not inherent to the particle itself. And the source mentions that this geometry does something else too. It twists.
Yeah, my notes mention gravitational chirality here.
So the vacuum isn't just textured tiles sitting perfectly flat. It has parity-violating torsion. There is a gravitomagnetic field with inherent torque.
Torque. So empty space is twisting us.
Constantly. The paper states that this vacuum geometry has a preferred direction, a chirality, as particles move. Especially as they approach the speed of light, they have to deal with this twist.
And they can't just fight it.
No. To find the lowest energy state to be efficient, they literally screw themselves into the fabric of space. They spiral.
They lock their internal spin to the background.
Yes, it is the path of least resistance. If the road you are driving on is twisting, you don't drive straight off the edge, you turn the wheel. If the universe has a corkscrew shape built into it, matter has to corkscrew to survive.
Which explains why things spiral, from the shape of galaxies all the way down to seashells. And that actually brings us to the wildest connection in this whole stack of research.
The biology connection.
Yeah, because if the universe basically has a spiral setting built into the factory floor that has to show up in us, in life.
And it absolutely does. This is where the paper stops looking at astrophysics and starts defining biological life, not as a separate random chemical accident, but as an informational anchor.
I love that term so much, informational anchor. It makes us sound less like wet biology and more like a broadcast signal.
That is much closer than you might think.
Yeah.
The source looks specifically at DNA. Now, we have known for a long time that bDNA, which is the standard form of DNA in your body, is a double helix.
Right. Watson and Crick, basic biology.
Exactly. But the big mystery in biology has always been, why is it right-handed? Why does DNA almost universally spiral to the right?
Homochirality, I remember learning about this. You could theoretically chemically synthesize left-handed DNA in a lab, right?
Right.
But nature just hates it.
Nature hates it because the vacuum hates it.
Wow.
The IFD model suggests that biological molecules prefer right-handedness, specifically because they are resonating with that vacuum torque we just talked about. The DNA is functioning as a molecular antenna, a resonant antenna tuned to the frequency of the local fractal descent. It is not just a passive storage device holding your genetic code. It is dynamically interacting with the geometry of space.
DNA spirals to the right because the vacuum twists to the right. It is physically tuning itself to the carrier wave of space-time.
It is finding that path of least resistance again.
So if we had left-handed DNA, we would be, what, out of sync with the universe?
We would be fighting the current constantly.
Okay.
We would be geometrically dissonant. And the visual data in the source material actually supports this.
Great.
There is a graph that really blew my mind. It is titled Quantum Coherence Preservation versus Collapse.
I have that graph right here in front of me, actually. It compares two structural architectures, a regular grid versus a Fibonacci spiral.
This is really the proof in the pudding for their claims. They mathematically tested how long quantum information, which is basically the delicate state of data in a biological system,
Yeah.
how long it can survive before it dissolves into random entropy and noise.
And the regular grid.
It flatlines. It is near instantaneous collapse. The decay exponent is alpha equals negative 10.102. It is an incredibly steep exponential drop. It is like trying to hold water in a sieve.
But the Fibonacci spiral, the curve on this graph just glides perfectly.
It follows a power law decay instead, with an alpha of negative 1.015. The numbers are staggering when you lay them out. The Fibonacci structure preserves quantum information 10,000 times longer than the regular grid.
10,000 times. That is not a tiny margin of error. That is the difference between a blink of an eye and a lifetime.
It creates what they call a quantum sanctuary. The paper suggests that neural microtubules, the structures inside our actual brain cells, are arranged in these Fibonacci spirals specifically to protect quantum information from entropy.
So we use the golden ratio, free, not just because it looks pretty in a sunflower or a nautilus shell, but because it is a literal shield.
It is a geometric survival strategy. Life is anchoring itself to the aperiodic template of the vacuum to keep from dissolving. It uses geometric beauty to survive the chaos of entropy. The source says this allows for the stable transition of complexity.
That is just profoundly cool. We are anchoring ourselves to the vacuum's aperiodic template. But look, we aren't just here to admire our own biology today. The mission of this deep dive was also to look at how we can use this knowledge.
Right, the practical application.
Exactly.
So,
How do we take this geometry of the void and actually build things with it?
and this brings us out of theory and onto the factory floor. This is the manufacturing protocol detailed in the source. Recursive fractal vapor deposition, or RFVD.
RFVD, it sounds very heavy industry.
It is industrial, but it is definitely not pouring concrete. It is more like growing metal. The process relies on something called acoustic lithography.
Now, lithography usually means printing, right? So is this sound printing?
Precisely. Instead of using a physical mold or a mechanical arm to place atoms, they use sound waves. They use piezoelectric harmonics to create a nodal template.
Can you explain that a bit more? A nodal template.
Imagine invisible sound waves in the air intersecting to create a three-dimensional blueprint. They sculpt the acoustic field into a multinodal holographic pattern. The atoms or cells simply fall into the low-pressure zones created by the sound without anything ever touching them.
Oh, like those somatics videos, where sand arranges itself into beautiful geometric patterns on a vibrating metal plate.
Exactly like that, but working in 3 dimensions and at an atomic scale. This forces the material to adopt that aperiodic stability we talked about earlier. It establishes a geometric lock right from the start, which prevents structural defects.
And then they do something even crazier. They use chiral acceleration. When I read this part, it sounded like something straight out of a comic book, shooting plasma ions through a helical magnetic field.
It's intense engineering, for sure. As the plasma moves through this helix, it acquires what is called a Berry phase.
Hold on. Berry phase. That is a heavy physics term that usually glazes people's eyes over. Break that down for you and me.
Think of it as material memory. If you tightly twist a rubber band and then somehow freeze it perfectly solid, that physical twist is locked inside the structure. By shooting the ions through a magnetic helix, they are embedding the topological twist of gravity into the atomic lattice of the metal itself.
So the metal remembers the spiral.
It creates the topological footprint. The material isn't just a dead block of steel anymore. It has an internal alignment with the torque of the vacuum. Wow. And because of that phase lock, and because they layer the matter at decreasing scales, they use a delta to the negative n formula, you achieve logarithmic strength scaling. But the real showstopper of RFED is oscillatory hormesis.
Hormesis. Now, that is a biology term. It basically means what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Correct. Usually, if you hit a piece of metal with a hammer, you weaken it. You create microcracks. But in these RFED materials, they have engineered it so that mechanical stress triggers a geometric reset.
So if I hit this new hull material with a hammer, instead of cracking,
It vibrates. And because the internal structure is perfectly tuned and fractal locked, that vibration channels the kinetic energy along specific nodal lines. The source makes a massive claim right here. Along these nodal lines, electrons behave as if they are massless.
massless electrons, so the energy just zips through the material with zero resistance.
Zero resistance. The energy flows instantly to the point of stress, the wound, if you will. And it facilitates a self-healing cycle. It repairs the internal dislocation using the energy of the impact itself.
It uses the energy of the impact to fix the damage caused by the impact. That is literally sci-fi armor.
It is true biomimicry.
Mm.
We aren't just building static walls anymore. We aren't building dead things. We are cultivating adaptive systems that behave much more like living tissue.
That is a huge shift in how we manufacture anything. And the source material backs all this up with some pretty heavy math. Now, I don't want us to get bogged down in equations, but there's a prominent mention of multi-scale Dirac operators and K-theory. What is the main takeaway there for the listener who maybe doesn't have a PhD in topology?
The takeaway is that engineers now have a rigorous way to mathematically measure resilience. They use these Dirac operators to filter out informational jitter.
Which is what exactly?
It is basically microscopic noise that doesn't cleanly fit the desired fractal pattern. It ensures the structure strictly adheres to the fractal window.
Okay, and K-theory, where does that fit in?
Think of K-theory as a way of mathematically counting escape routes. It measures niche counts. If you are building a bridge, you obviously want redundancy. If one tension cable snaps, you want 10 others to instantly take the load.
Right.
A high rank in K-theory means the material has thousands of alternative topological pathways for energy to dissipate.
So it acts as a mathematical guarantee that the system won't fail catastrophically.
Exactly. It turns a brittle catastrophic failure into a graceful adaptation. If one microscopic part breaks it, the energy has a dozen other ways to flow without causing total structural collapse. It is about building an intelligent network, not just a dumb wall.
Which perfectly brings us to the ultimate application in these papers. If you can build a hull that physically heals itself, and you can align its atomic structure with the actual geometry of space, you are ready to travel.
Yes, the VARP drive housing spec sheet.
I did notice that typo in the source, by the way, VARP instead of WARP. But given the constant context of vortices in the math, maybe it is not a typo at all.
It very well could be intentional. Vacuum-augmented resonance propulsion, perhaps. But whatever the acronym, let's look at what the specs actually demand. The stated goal is to build a hull capable of surviving the pressurized vortex of the vacuum.
This goes right back to the idea that space is a fluid medium, a twisting ocean.
Right. If space is a twisting ocean, you definitely don't want to navigate it in a brick. If you want to move fast through water, you build a sleek boat. You make it hydrodynamic. This spec sheet is describing a ship hull that is gravidodynamic,
And to do that, it demands a fractal dimension of approximately 2.718.
which is E, Euler's number, the base of the natural logarithm.
Why that specific number, though? Why not just a clean dimension of 3?
Because E represents maximum continuous growth efficiency. You see it everywhere in nature.
Yeah.
In population growth and compound interest in radioactive decay.
Yeah.
If your hull has that specific fractal dimension, it achieves what they call optimal vacuum coupling.
So instead of using a massive rocket engine to just brute force and punch space in the face.
You couple with it. You stop fighting the friction, that geometric friction we defined as mass earlier, and you start actively surfing the spirals.
Wow.
The implication here is profound. It means interstellar travel isn't fundamentally a problem of generating enough energy. It is a problem of geometry.
If you get the shape of the ship exactly right, the vacuum actively wants you to move.
Exactly. You attain near-perfect alignment for chiral resonance. You use the geometric friction to your advantage. It implies you don't aggressively punch through space. You slide smoothly along its natural torsion.
That is a strangely comforting thought. Humanity has been trying to brute force the universe for centuries, and the universe has just been patiently waiting for us to learn how to dance with it.
We have been stubbornly building square boxes in a world entirely made of spirals.
And now we're finally learning to build spirals. It connects everything we have covered today. The hat tile preventing the mathematical collapse, the DNA antenna tuning into the gravitational twist, the self-healing metal utilizing the vibrational resonance. It is all the exact same logic.
It is a single unified thread. The grand synthesis of this deep dive is that IFD suggests the universe, life, and advanced engineering are all governed by the exact same periodic chiral geometric logic.
So humanity is officially moving from static construction to cultivating adaptive systems.
And that profound shift leads us to one final, rather haunting concept hidden near the end of the source material, a word I had actually never seen before, intaxy.
Yes, I circled this word 3 times in my notes, intaxy. The source defines it as a holographic record of the universe's aperiodic order.
A record, which strongly implies memory. It implies that space-time isn't just a physical machine, it is a recording device.
And if we, meaning our biology, our very consciousness, are informational anchors resonating perfectly with that device, if our DNA is a tuned antenna,
It begs a massive philosophical question. Is the communication strictly one way? Are we just passively listening to the broadcast of the cosmos? Or by resonating so perfectly with the vacuum, are we actively adding to the record?
are we writing the history of space-time? That is honestly a little terrifying to think about.
Or incredibly empowering? It strongly suggests we aren't just accidental tourists here. We are an integral part of the architecture. Does our geometric resonance actually help write the history and future of space-time?
We are the feedback loop.
Precisely. We are the universe experiencing and recording itself.
Well, I am definitely going to need to sit with that one for a while. Maybe just go outside, stare at a sunflower, and really appreciate the golden ratio engineering.
It is a very good place to start processing all this.
That is a whole lot to chew on for a Tuesday,
Yeah.
but that is exactly what we do here. We take the source material and we follow the logic all the way down.
All the way to the very bottom of the fractal.
Exactly. Thank you so much for walking us through this paradigm shift. This deep dive definitely permanently changed how I will look at empty space.
Anytime. Always keep asking the big questions.
And to everyone listening out there, thanks for diving in with us. We will see you in the next deep dive.